So I think we will get started. You are welcome to continue introducing yourself in the chat and using the chat as much as you'd like to during the session. So that is fine. I just wanted to start by thanking UVM and VSAC for hosting this event. I know it's a big undertaking to have all these different sessions and breakout rooms and workshops, and it took a lot of planning to make this happen. And the team at VSAC is just amazing with the months of planning they put into these events. And it's nice to have UVM hosting the tech side of everything today. So thank you. Kathi Printon from VSAC is moderating our session today, so she's available in the chat. And we also have Patty from UVM who's here for any tech issues that come up. I just want to let you know that it's okay to have your video on if you would like it on. Even though the session is being recorded, your video won't show up in the recording because it's in speaker view. So don't worry about that. If you want to have your video on, you can. You won't be captured in that recording. And also there's closed captioning that you can toggle on and off in your Zoom tools if you want to use that. And also a note about the recording, the sessions today, I know that the welcome and the 2 workshop sessions are recorded and you can watch us after. And I know there's a link, Kathi, I don't know if we have that handy to share. I didn't ask you ahead of time, but there's a link to the College and Career Pathways event website, which you probably all use to register. But there are lots of great resources there and that you can click on, and the recordings will be available soon.
Right. Thank you, Kathi. There will be a VSAC link in, and they'll be put up next week.
Okay, great. Thanks, Kathi.
Yep.
Okay, so I am Kathi Terami. I'm with an organization called CLiC. I'll tell you a little bit more about that in a minute. I also wanted to introduce Lauren Duran, our program manager, who is here. She is going to be helping field questions in the chat. So as I'm going through the workshop material, feel free to ask questions in the chat. Lauren can answer those. And if you have questions that are more VSAC oriented, Kathi can also help. Kathi Printon can help answer those in the chat as well. So feel free to chime in the chat anytime. And maybe not even if you have questions, but as parents and educators and students, we all have our own experiences we can share with others. So if I say something that feels like part of the story to you and you have more of the story to share, please go ahead and share that in the chat. So questions, comments, all welcome in the chat. And I also wanted to mention that Lauren is leading a workshop called Career Search, Finding the Right Fit for hundreds of high school students this spring as a part of this College and Career Pathways event. So she already started and has quite a few on the calendar coming up of working directly with high school students and talking to them about some of the same things we'll be talking with parents and guardians today. Okay, so a little bit about our organization. So we're a nonprofit organization that works with K through 12 schools. Believe it or not, we start career development in kindergarten. We follow the continuum of career development. So in elementary school, it's all about awareness of careers. It's pretty fascinating time to expose the youngest students to different careers that are out there. And sometimes they don't even know things like their teachers are working, that's a career, a profession of choice. And it's also a good time to try on different careers. Sometimes you might remember thinking back to elementary school, doing dress up as a firefighter or a doctor or nurse or a police officer, something like that. So just awareness around careers. We usually do that by bringing a lot of people into the classroom to talk with students about what they do for their careers. In middle school, it's more about helping students identify their interests and start to explore careers, not in a career defining way, but really in a way to expose students to as many different careers as possible through bringing people into the classroom and also getting students out of the classroom, maybe doing things like job shadowing. And at the high school level, it gets a little more intensive with career preparation. We still are bringing people into the classroom and doing workshops with students, connecting their interests to career opportunities, but also starting to look at things like work-based learning, internships, youth apprenticeships, different things like that in a more intensive way with high school students. So Lauren will post in the chat a link to our website. If you want to learn anything more about our organization or those programs, you can go check that out. And We've been doing this work since 1998. We've reached over 25,000 students. Just over 1,500 employers have participated in our programs. We've done training for over 800 teachers, and we've reached almost 350 schools. I think by the end of this spring, we'll have topped that. And we do this work in both New Hampshire and Vermont. Okay, so we have a warm-up poll for you. I'd love to hear a little bit about people who are in the room, no matter what your role is. If you could answer on this poll, Patty will pull that up for us. If you talk about career planning with your teen, and I suppose this could be if you're an educator or a counselor, just apply this to with your students. If you're a parent or guardian, your own teen, and if you're a student, answer for how often you talk about this with your parent or guardian or educators. Frequently, occasionally, rarely. There's no right or wrong answer, and they're all anonymous, so feel free to answer as honestly as you can. We'll give people, we have, oh gosh, you are all fast. We're up to 80%, maybe just a couple of more. Can go ahead and answer. Okay, Patty, I think we can go ahead and share the results. So what I'm seeing here on my screen says that 36% of us talk with our teens about career planning frequently, 57% occasionally, so that's most of us, and 7% rarely. Those are all fine, and I forgot to mention that a lot of it can be dependent on the age of your student or the grade that they're in, and maybe the older they get, the more often you might talk about this. But something related and interesting that I want to share with you, because we work with students so much in schools and we do a lot of career interest surveys with students, we ask students this question: how often do adults talk with you about your career interests? And so I can share with you that about 1/3 say frequently and often, and the remaining 2/3 say sometimes or hardly ever. So that really tells us that anything we can do to boost these conversations can be really helpful. And just the fact that you're here today tells us a lot. So, okay, you can close those poll results if they're still up on your screen. And we're going to talk a little bit about interests and aspirations. This is something that we do a lot of with students. So one thing that when we work with adults, which could be educators, employers, parents, anyone who's going to be connecting with youth on career interests, we like to say, think back, put yourself back in that same age or grade level as the students that you're going to be working with or talking with around career development. So think about, because this event is about high school students and teens, what were your own career aspirations in high school? Take a moment, if you're willing, to share that with us in the chat. And what is your career now? We'd love to hear what your aspirations were when you were in high school and what your career is now. Some of you may have multiples, all right, if you want to list more than one, or pick the most memorable one, or the thing you think you wanted to be most. Back when I was in high school, in the 90s, early 90s, I wanted to be an interior decorator. In middle school, I wanted to be a chef. My interest changed quite a bit, and now I am working as a nonprofit professional in career development with schools. Really, for me, pretty unrelated to my aspirations back when I was in high school. So if you wouldn't mind, share with us in the chat what careers you were aspiring to back when you were in high school, and let us know what your career is now. We'll see if there are any matches. Sometimes there are, most often there aren't when we talk with adults. So we have aspired to be a golf course superintendent. I think that's a first for me that I've ever seen that one come up. And now an IT manager. I'm curious if there's any connections with any of the skills there with those positions. So those sound very different to me. We have another one saying, I knew that I was interested in different kinds of people and communication, and now I'm an elementary school teacher. So it sounds like you had really general interests that are very related to what you're doing now. Another person says, didn't really think about careers in high school, figured I'd get ideas in college. That's so interesting, especially considering what you do now, which I think I know. Another one here is I wanted to go into politics in high school and now working in federal government, community and economic development. Sounds close, politics and government, but different. Wanted to be a pilot and now a graphic designer. So it sounds very different. Wanted to be a scientist and now an NP. Erica, can you tell us what an NP is in the chat? We have another one saying wanted to be a teacher in high school and now a preschool teacher. Mostly, we have another one here that says possibly a journalist, now in energy efficient consulting. Those sound different. Would have loved to have found a career as a backup singer, ended up in post-secondary education, love that. Wanted to be a physical therapist or a pharmacist, now a teacher. Okay, so NP, thanks Erica, nurse practitioner. So scientist, nurse practitioner, sounds like there might be some things related there. So I'm kind of surprised because a lot of these examples, there's been several that have been either similar or share a lot of interests between what you wanted to be in high school and what you are now, but definitely some big differences out there too. Here's another one, wanted to be in fashion and now an accountant. So that's a great example of differences. So the reason that we do this with adults who will be talking with teens about their career interests is because it's helpful to know that at different stages in that career development, students are going to be interested in different things. And we talk about that a lot with students, that what you want to be now might not be what you want to be next year or in 3 months or 6 months. It can change a lot, and that's okay. That's all a part of the learning. So it's helpful for us as adults to acknowledge and honor that when talking with youth, but also helpful to share that with youth who sometimes might think what I'm interested in now is what I'm going to end up doing, and that might not be the case, but it could be. Okay, so thanks for sharing all that. As we're talking with students about this, we like to use a visual of success, like it's this straight linear path. You know what you want to do and how to get there, and that's where you're going. But while we talk to youth about this, we talk quite a bit about defining success. How do you define success? Is it how your friend or your classmate defines success? Is it how your parent defines success, your teacher, your siblings, your neighbors, your friends' parents? Everybody can have a different definition to success, and your own definition to success can change over time depending on your station in life and what your goals are. So not only is the path to success often full of plot twists and turns, that path can wind quite a bit. Part of that is just because that definition of success is changing, and you might be exposed to opportunities that you change your mind. In addition to having kind of a fun graphic to share with students like this, there's also some data to back it up. So according to the US Bureau of Labor Statistics, the average person changes jobs more than 12 times over their lifetime. So not only is your path towards success twisty and winding, but the chances are you're going to change jobs a lot. Not everybody does, because that figure of 12 is an average. So some people change jobs a lot less and some people even more. But most people can count on changes, and there's all sorts of reasons for those changes. Things like seeking higher pay, better benefits or job perks, relocation, you move from one place to another, career advancement, you're climbing the ladder and changing jobs. Maybe you're at a place in your life you want to do something less stressful or more challenging. You're changing your career focus entirely. Changing jobs can be different than changing careers. You can change jobs within a career, or you can completely change your careers. So we talk to students about that, all the reasons why someone might change. And some of you, I don't know how many times you've changed jobs, but The way that the study went for the Bureau of Labor Statistics is the younger age sets change jobs more often, and then people often get to a place where they change jobs less often. So you can kind of look at the data and see those patterns. Not for everybody, but on average, that's what that is. So in building content for this session of talking to parents about their teens' career search, we interviewed and talked to a lot of people, high school educators, school counselors, work-based learning coordinators, college career counselors, college admissions officers, many parents, employers, and a lot of students, high school students, recent graduates, college graduates, people who didn't go to college, and everyone in between. So a lot of the information that I'll be sharing with you is gathered from those interviews we did with people. And I would love if you have anything to share with us about any of these concepts, please share it in the chat, or you can also drop us a line separately. We'll share contact information towards the end. So something, if you I don't know if you know if the youth that you're working with, either students or your own children, if they've ever taken any kind of interest survey. This can be a really good starting point for students. There's lots of pretty easy to access interest surveys out there. A lot of times schools, school counseling offices, work-based learning coordinators, the Department of Labor has resource centers, and others will have all sorts of interest tools and assessments. Lauren is going to share in the chat a link to this career interest survey that I have here. It's linked to the 16 national career clusters, which are pretty frequently used in career and tech centers, but can be used in traditional high schools as well, or for anyone just in your home, you can use this. I have taken this survey many times, several times. My own kids have taken it multiple times, and a lot of students we work with have taken this survey. And all that they're doing is they're identifying different things that they're interested in. And there's a way to tally up those interests and match them up with career clusters, which are very, there's 16 career clusters that all occupations are broken up into. And so it can show students, if you have a lot of interests in this cluster, look at all of the dozens of occupations that might be of interest to you. It's a way to really help students who maybe have no idea what they want to do start getting some ideas. And it's also a way for students who might think they're interested in a specific occupation or job title, take a look at what other job titles and occupations are within related fields within that cluster. So it can help narrow down options, but it can also help broaden opportunities. It kind of does both things, which both are good to do along that career development path. So I really recommend, if your student hasn't done one of these, go to this link, print this out, do this with them, do it yourself. It's really fun to do as an adult, and go through and look and say, and sometimes you can remember back, like if you were answering this as a 16-year-old, what would you have said? Is it a lot different than what you would have said now? That can be hard to do, but maybe you do remember what a lot of your interests were, and you could do that. So it just helps on opening up those conversations to not just have your child do it, but to also do it yourself and talk and compare some of those results. Something we like to say about career interest surveys is there's all different types of tools out there. Try to do more than one, and try to do them more than once, because there's really no definitive answer or conclusion that you can draw from just taking one survey one time, because of things we talked about. Your life situation changes, your interests change, your goals might change. So it can be helpful to do and use different career interest tools, but they at least can start conversations. And while schools might be doing some of these things with students, it can be really nice to also have this being done in the home and with parents or friends or neighbors, things like that. Back when I was in high school, I did a career interest survey with my neighbor. She was very into having career conversations with me, and that was great. And so as a parent, I can also say it can be helpful to encourage your child to talk with many people at school, family, friends, to have conversations with multiple people. Okay, so while we talk with students a lot about interests, and those are important conversations to have, it's good to also start talking about skills. What are essential skills for life after high school? All different kinds of things you might do. Managing a household, being a citizen, voting, working for an employer. So skills that can be really essential to all different facets of life after high school. So we have lots of conversations with youth about this. This is two of our job shadow students at a tech company. And if you could share with us in the chat, what is a skill that you learned from your first job that you still use today? So think back to that first job. It could be babysitting, paper route, working in food service, working in a barn or a farm, whatever that first job is that you got paid for. Think of a skill that you learned from that first job that you still use today. I would love to hear some examples that you can just type right into the chat. I'm going to think of one and I'll type it in too. Okay, so great. We have them flowing in now. We have dependability, coming up with creative, fun activities for kids to do while babysitting. Love that. My first job was babysitting too, and I put working with a variety of people. I learned to develop great relationships with adults and kids through babysitting. Communicating with different types of people, communication skills, paying attention. My first job was teaching swimming, so I learned early on how to manage a group of children and teaching techniques. Learning to demonstrate value through hard work, patience with different types of people in a hectic environment. These are fantastic. So jobs you learned, I'm thinking likely as a teenager, that you're still using today. So when we're talking with students, we love to talk about things that you are doing right now. Skills you are building now are going to be important to you for your entire life. Sometimes when we're working with students on drafting their first resume or a cover letter for applying for a job, they say like, oh, I'm young, I don't have any experience, I don't really have any skills or things to share. So we talk to them about those very first experiences and things that they're learning in school and using in volunteer or service learning, that those skills that they're building, they're going to use for their whole lives. So you are evidence of that. Thank you for sharing all this. So this one's a little bit harder, but if you can take a moment to think as an adult, what is something you wish you had learned sooner? We ask this to groups of adults all the time. We get a range of answers, and then we can share this with students, high school students. And we can also use it to help develop the career readiness curriculum that we use in high school for an internship program. What are things that as an adult you wish you had learned when you were younger? Because those are the things we can be teaching and helping youth practice right now. So these might be things also that can take a little longer to develop. So it might be something you can talk with students about, but you really need to practice it in some school or out of school settings in order to gain these skills, and they can take maybe years. Okay, so we have some examples coming into the chat. And I'm not sure if a couple of these are from the last question or this question, but I'll just read them out loud. Learning to demonstrate value through hard work, patience with different types of people in a hectic environment. I know this one, time management, is an answer to the second question. That is a tricky one that some people, including myself, have to keep working on. Another one is that you can work in something you enjoy now. Ooh, that's a great one. That sounds a little bit like some wisdom and advice. How to be organized and plan, prioritize sleep so you don't exhaust yourself. I'm guessing that's really speaking from experience, that most even people work is not the most important facet of their life. So it sounds like a little more wisdom there. How to talk on the phone in a professional manner, how to ask good questions and self-advocacy skills. Kathi, I'm glad you shared that. Self-advocacy can be really developmentally challenging for young people, actually even some adults. So that's a really good thing to help students practice. Some schools are great at that in different classes and through counseling, but that can be something that takes a lot of work, but very useful. Another one here is boundaries. Wishing you had learned about setting boundaries sooner. So thanks for sharing all of those. These are when you're having conversations with the youth that you're talking to about career development, you can talk about your own experiences, share those experiences, but then also be sure to ask them questions about skills they are learning right now and what skills they think might be essential and important and what ways they might gain those skills. So that's the next thing that we'll talk about. The sets of skills that we talk with youth about are called the 4 C's. They're kind of a nationally accepted set of way to group skills. So I'll go through these with you. There's sub skills in all of these sets of skills. So communication, a lot of you mentioned that in your examples in the chat. Collaboration, I think some of you did, working with different people. Creativity and critical thinking. So we have lots of skills within these categories, but this is something that we talk with students about, that if you can build skills and identify what skills you already have, identify what skills you need to work on more, and find ways to build those skills by maybe taking on a first-time or part-time job, maybe doing some volunteer work, maybe doing service learning through a structured school program. Whatever ways that students can build those skills in high school can give them a head start. But then the big tricky part is how to articulate those skills to others. So if you can have conversations with your student or child about that, that can help them just through talking with you about those kinds of skills you already have, skills you want to build, and how can you talk about that with other people can help them when they do their first job interview or even college interviews for admissions. All sorts of conversations they might have with a new adult who they haven't had that conversation before can help if you've practiced some of these conversations with them. So helping students articulate those skills is sometimes a missing piece in the skill conversation with students. So there's lots of great ways that schools can help do that through work-based learning programs and school counseling. But if parents and guardians can be doing that and other adults with students outside of school, that can be a big help. So I'll just share with you, Vermont's Agency of Education has proficiency-based graduation requirements that you may or may not have heard of, but within those requirements is a set of transferable skills, which is just what we're talking about, these essential skills, and they have 5 groups of them. There's clear and effective communication. So you see that matches up with that first C, communication. Self-direction, which is not one of the 4 Cs. And interestingly, in New Hampshire, they have something called work study practice skills, and they also added self-direction to it. So I love that Vermont, New Hampshire have added self-direction to their set of really important skills for youth to learn before they graduate. Creative and practical problem solving. So you see that other C word in there. Responsible and involved citizenship, and informed and integrative thinking, which is pretty close to critical thinking. Same thing with these 5 sets of skills. There are all sorts of subsets of skills within these. I don't have the link available now, but if you were really interested in learning more about this, you could Google this or go to the Vermont Agency of Education's website and just type in transferable skills, and you can click and get charts of all the skills that are there. Our staff pours into these because when we're working on career readiness curriculum development, we want to make sure that we hit a lot of these skills that are required for graduation. So just a little snapshot of something you may or may not be aware of from the Agency of Education about transferable skills required for graduation, very aligned with those national 4 Cs and the conversation we're having around essential skills. Okay, so we had identifying interests, talking about essential skills, now we're going to talk a little bit about career options. This is a big part of what we talk with students about, especially here in Vermont. There might be a feeling of Vermont is such a small rural state with a small population compared to other places in the country, and there just might not be a lot of job opportunities here. So sometimes we've had conversations with both students and parents about what students are interested in and whether or not those job opportunities are here. So we can share a little more with you about that. So if you would take a guess in the chat, how many occupations do you think there are in the United States? You can make a wild guess, or you might have an educated guess if you've done work in this field, but how many occupations do you think there are in the United States? These aren't the number of jobs, they're the number of occupations. So when we talked about those 16 career clusters, all of these occupations could be divided into those 16 categories. So we have 10,000 and hundreds. So we have 1775. Sounds like a good year. So we'll take a couple more guesses and then I'll pop up the answer. Oh, and I should say this number fluctuates every year. It's pretty wild, but some occupations fade away and new occupations come up. And sometimes in a given year, one happens more than the other. So we check this data every year and it actually just went up by close to 100 occupations. So right now it's currently 1,040 occupations exist in the United States, just up from 900 and some last year. And how about in Vermont? Can you take a guess at how many you think are in Vermont? One clue is it has to be 1,040 or less, because that US total includes occupations in every state in the country. So we know it's going to be less than that. But I think when we're talking with students, they're usually surprised that there are this many occupations in Vermont. So we have 430, 700, and again, this number fluctuates from year to year. There's actually, I think, 12 fewer occupations this year than there were last year in Vermont, so not a big difference. So I will go ahead and pop this in, 555. As of last year, the latest data that we have, that's the number of occupations here. So you can imagine around the country, certain states might have occupations that other states don't have. Something unique about Vermont is there's no coastline, so there's not going to be certain coastal types of jobs or ocean types of jobs in Vermont would be an example that a state like California or Florida might have a lot of. But for our little state, 555 occupations is quite a few. And what we have found when we're working with youth, we can lead workshops for assemblies at schools of hundreds of students. And most often, any occupation that any student in the room is interested in exists in Vermont. It's very rare that they have an interest of a job that's not in Vermont. So how do we help students explore these options? There's lots of great things that schools are doing around exploring career options with students, and you can do some of those same things with students in your home. And a lot of that is just encouraging your teen to explore career options related to their interests by doing some of their own work or doing work with you, like online research is very easy. It's something that most students can navigate. If you're interested in a career, check it out online. There's all sorts of great resources online. Things like informational interviews. This is so simple to do, is to have a student or child come up with a few questions they have about a career that they might be interested in and ask a few different people, an uncle, an aunt, a neighbor. I remember when I was in high school, I interviewed neighbors, just asking them what their jobs were like. Students could do informational interviews with people who are working in fields they're interested in, or just they could ask anyone just to find out about careers in general. What do you like about your job? What don't you like about your job? What education and training did you do to get your job? What education and training did you have to do after you got your job? There's all sorts of great questions they can ask. And if they ask multiple people, they'll find all different perspectives that people have about their jobs. So this is really simple. Some schools have students doing informational interviews, but this is an easy thing that any family can do with their students. And it usually is pretty fascinating. They're good conversations and they can learn a lot. Things like workplace tours. Some schools organize these for students, but you can also organize them. They can tour workplaces that family members work in, or maybe you have a friend or a neighbor who can give them a chance to tour their workplace. Same thing with job shadowing. If your school does job shadowing, that's great, but you might also be able to hook your child up with a chance to shadow someone in the workplace. This can be anywhere from 1 to 4 hours or even longer, where they can maybe spend a whole day in a workplace with one individual person, kind of following them around through what they do in their job. Most workplaces are pretty receptive to doing that. Not all workplaces, because there can be privacy or confidentiality issues, but sometimes those can be worked around. Encouraging your teen to do an internship. These are often coordinated through schools in most cases. They fall within the state's requirement for high schools to offer work-based learning experiences to students. There's no graduation requirement for students to do work-based learning or internships, but schools need to at least offer them. And those can be one of the most intensive ways for students to explore a career right in their own community. So if students can understand the skills, education, and training that are required for various careers they might be interested in, that can give them a big boost on their career path or their career development where they're at. And remember the conversation we had earlier about those interests changing over time. So if you notice your child's interests are changing, that might be a good time to do a couple of informational interviews around that career, or maybe try to do another job shadow or something related to what those new interests are, to try that field on for size. So keeping in mind that those change. I did just catch that Kathi posted the Vermont Career Connect career videos. I have watched most of those, dozens to hundreds of career videos that VSAC has compiled, where this could be as simple as a student watching a 4-minute video or a 10-minute video of someone talking about their career. They are fantastic to watch. So it's just a way, actually, I have a son who's a sophomore in high school. Last year, he watched one of the Vermont Career Connect videos on audio engineering, and he got audio software and is making all of his own music for his YouTube channels. So he watched a video, was inspired to get the software and to learn how to create his own music. So he didn't have to worry about royalties and paying for music, or YouTube taking down his videos because he was using copyrighted music. So lots of potential there with those career videos to inspire youth to check out fields they're interested in, or fields they might not know much about. Okay, so the workshop I was in this morning, talking about different education training opportunities after high school, shared this resource. I'm not sure if you've ever seen it. Lauren is going to pop a link in the chat that you can go and look at the online version of this. We use the paper version for our in-person workshops in schools. So Lauren brings these with when she does those career search workshops. But this is a great resource. That's a collaboration from the McClure Foundation and the Vermont Department of Labor to take Vermont's labor market information and put it into really easy to understand, bite-size information for students to use. And actually adults can use this too. So if you haven't seen this before, be sure to check it out. I'll give you kind of a overview of this and tell you how we talk with students about it so that you could share this with your child if it's something that's of interest to you. But for students to I also attended at the resource fair this morning, the Vermont Department of Labor's session, and Cindy, who was there presenting, shared Vermont's labor market information website, which you can go right to the Vermont Department of Labor, go to their labor market information page, and you can get data on all 555 of those occupations in Vermont. But it can be a little daunting if you're into spreadsheets and long lists of numbers and charts. It can be fascinating, but if you're not, it can be hard to navigate. So that's what this resource does, is it makes that complex information easy to navigate. So what they've done is they've divided up Vermont's highest paying, highest demand jobs, so the jobs that pay the best and have the most openings in Vermont. And every 2 years when they update this data, the number of occupations changes just a little bit and their criteria changes just a little bit. So it looks different every 2 years, but they've divided them up into 4 categories using something called Holland codes, which is one of the many ways to divide up different career fields. So they've divided them up into 4. I'm just going to flip back and forth between these 2 interior pages of this brochure. That orange section is, do you like to observe, learn, analyze, and solve problems? If you do, here are some high-paying, high-demand jobs that fit that category. Do you like to work with people and use your creativity to guide or persuade is another category. And the other 2 are, do you like working with your hands or with machines to make, fix, or build things? And are you organized and detail-oriented? And do you like to work with lots of information? So it shows students that there are all these occupations in Vermont. Here are some of the highest paying, highest demand jobs. And here's 4 category groupings to help you kind of think about where your interests are. Now, when we bring this resource to youth and they have a copy of the paper brochure in their hands, we make sure to tell students a few important things. One is that if an occupation you're interested in isn't listed here, that doesn't mean it's not important. It doesn't mean it doesn't pay well. It doesn't mean that it isn't in high demand. It just didn't make all of the criteria to be in this brochure, which has limited space because it's printed on paper. So we point students out to the resource here. There's a link at the end that they can go to and click to find information on all different occupations in Vermont, all 555. So students can look those up. But this can be a good springboard or starting place for students to start learning how to use labor market information, which every state in the country keeps track of the same labor market information and reports it to the US Department of Labor, and then reports it to citizens of their own states. So we talk to students about number of openings. So there's 10-year projected openings. We talk to students about the minimum training requirement to enter that field, and then the median wage. And we talk to students about what does median mean? So they get a little math lesson in there about why we use median wage when we're reporting labor market information. That average could be really tricky, because if you took an average, there could be some outliers in an occupation that could skew the average one way or the other and make it lower than you might expect it to be or higher than you expect it to be. So median just shows that half of the people working in this occupation make less and half of the people make more. It's really just in the middle. And so we talk to students about, here's the median hourly wage and the median annual salary. So it gives students a chance to start looking at those numbers, which we find high school students are very interested in wages and salaries. So they can start looking at things like, how many openings are there in a field I might be interested in? What kind of education do I need? And how much can I expect to earn? So it helps students navigate that information, which can help them make choices. So I said earlier that there were 2 things we like to tell students. And one of them is that if your occupation of interest didn't make the cut for this brochure, you can still go get the data on it. Don't worry about it. Doesn't mean it's not important. We need people in all of those occupations. But the second thing also is that you might be interested in more than one category. So when you're a high school student, you don't necessarily need to choose and stick with a category. You can explore occupations in multiple categories. The last session that I was in, they actually had a poll asking attendees which category do they fit most within. And it was really hard for some people to pick just one. You couldn't pick more than one. We're adults and we were having a hard time with that. And so for youth, it's really important for them to know that you can have multiple interests in multiple categories and explore those. Try to do more than one job shadow or informational interview or workplace tour, or watch multiple career videos and try on different things, see what you might be interested in. And then also remember, the average person changes jobs 12 times. So you might try on one career for 5 years and then switch to a different field or switch to multiple jobs within the same field over your working life. So all those things are okay. So those are good conversations to have with students. Okay, so if you have any questions about the information in this, you can pop them in the chat and Lauren or Kathi can try to answer them, or we can also see if there's time at the end to answer them. And if there's a question that you have that we can't answer directly in the chat or today, we can also follow up with you after if you give us contact information, and you can private message any of us in the chat. All right, so we're going to wrap up with some, it doesn't fit within career interests, essential skills, or career options. These are just some noteworthy items, and most of this information comes from those interviews that I mentioned before. When we talk to high school students, high school graduates, college students, college graduates, college admissions officers, career counselors, school counselors, parents, employers, all of those people that we talk to. And I actually interviewed another round of 5 people this week just to get some fresh information from the original interviews we did about a year ago. We found a lot of patterns from talking to people directly about what advice would you give to parents who are helping guide their children on their career path, parents and guardians who might not have access to the same resources that educators and work-based learning coordinators and others have. So one of the big things that we talked about were influencers. What are things that influence students and youth to pursue different careers? Now, these influencers have changed over time quite a bit. In the 20 plus years that I've been doing this work, we've seen these influencers change a lot. And that has changed what fields young people are interested in. So think about, I would love to hear in the chat if you can think about what things might influence youth to pursue a certain career. I'm just going to share 5 examples with you, but there are dozens. So you might have some that you'll share in the chat that I don't have on my slide, but I'm just going to use these as an example. Now, while you're thinking of those things and popping some into the chat, I'd love to hear what influencers you think. You could say what influenced you when you were in high school or after high school. What influenced you to pursue a certain career? You can think about that. But this is important to think of when you are thinking of different ways for your student to explore various careers. Some of these influencers can come into play with those. So go ahead and you can put anything you want in the chat, and I'm going to go ahead and share the examples that I have. So entertainment. This would be movies, television, music, any kind of entertainment, even things like books, magazines, any kind of entertainment. Now, this is one that I've seen a change a lot since I've been doing this work in the late 90s. Because I remember when like certain TV shows would come out and students would be really interested in that field. CSI comes to mind. I remember when there were lots of students wanting to do crime scene investigation and forensics. Entertainment has changed so much because of the internet and YouTube and how easy it is to access old media and entertainment along with new current media. So that's a big one that has changed a lot. Social media was completely non-existent when I was in high school. So when I was in high school, I had no social media influence on my career planning, but now youth have a whole lot of social media influence. They can see someone who's in a certain field on social media and they might become interested in pursuing that. We see a lot of that with YouTube, TikTok, Instagram, different ways that students can see what other people do for a living and how they earn money. I'm going to interrupt my slide and read some of these here. Practicality of finding a job. I love that one. Family health issues. That can definitely be an influence. Role models. Hopefully lots of positive ones. National and world events. Kathi says matching passion and interest with outlook and ability to financially support life choices. Influencers, friends and teachers. Some folks were helpful in what not to pursue. Yes. So I should have prefaced this slide with influences can be negative or positive. I had a conversation with a 20-year-old last week. We met for breakfast and we had a conversation about negative and positive influences, how some youth might, for example, aspire to do the same career that their parent does, or they might be persuaded not to pursue that career for one reason or another. And it could have something to do with when that parent comes home from work. Are they exhausted and negative and not feeling good about their job, or are they really positive and upbeat? So it could have to do with things like that. So there could be positive and negative influences with each of these things. Peers, friends, conversations with friends. What does a friend want to do? When we do job shadow career interest surveys with 8th graders, I remember going into middle schools and students were filling out the little paper survey, and every now and then we would get a pair of surveys that were identical, and there may be 50 questions. They're circling all sorts of things, going through this in 15 to 20 minutes, and there could be 2 that were identical because 2 students sat next to each other and wanted to have the exact same interests. So peers can have a big impact on influencing career choices. School, what they're exposed to, what they've experienced. Family, we talked quite a bit about that. A person that I talked to yesterday mentioned geographic location. Wouldn't that be a big influencer, like on what careers you're exposed to based on where you live? And that could have an impact on what your choices are in either broadening your options or also limiting your options. So that negative, positive as well. Kathi also shared, I had a friend who aspired to follow his father into the medical field, was not strong in science and math, ended up being an extremely successful interior designer. Love that. So think about those influences. And I mean, you'll have to have conversations in your family of what works for you and what doesn't work for you. But I tend to think the more exposure, the better. And negative influences and positive influences can both be beneficial. And definitely what Kathi mentioned and a couple of others I think have mentioned, that if you try something on for size and it doesn't fit, that is just as important as if you are exposed to something that's positive and helping you continue to pursue that career. So they both are important, those positive and negative experiences that help you decide if you like something or don't like something. So don't be disappointed if a student does a job shadow, for example, and they come back saying, no way, I'm not interested in that job. That is just as important as them coming back and saying, yes, I'd like to pursue this more. So lots of different influences on youth. This is a tiny list that I'm sharing here with you today, but there are lots more. Now, for my last slide here on these noteworthy items is advice from experts. So this is all the conversations that I mentioned I had with people. These were the things that came out as common patterns and themes. Let your teen initiate the process. This was big. I heard this from a lot of post-secondary education professionals and from employers. One 18-year-old shared this with me. Really let your teen initiate the process. That can do wonders. It can help them take ownership in the process. It can help them build skills. So although it can be tempting to try to do everything and start everything for your child, it can really be helpful if they can initiate it, and you can create an environment that's safe and comfortable for them to do that. So also be okay with small things like 5-minute conversations, maybe on a drive to the store or to sports practice or to school. It doesn't necessarily have to be sit down and have a 2-hour meeting. It could be short little sound bites talking about careers. Create opportunities for exploration and skill building. We talked about that with volunteer work. Maybe doing a project at home, something that can help with exploring different things and building skills. Be a sounding board. Listen and ask questions. This is so important. We all love to share our own stories and experiences with younger people so that they can learn from us. I would say it's just as important, if not more important, to really listen. So say, I'm here for you. What do you want to talk about? Tell me what you're interested in. And really let the youth do a lot of the talking and guiding those conversations. Try out some tools with your teen. I already shared, Lauren shared in the chat that link to that interest inventory. That can be a good way to start doing that. But if you do them with your teen, it can be more fun and you can have better conversations. Focus on strengths. There's a lot of research out there that says strengths, the focus on strengths is more helpful than focusing on weaknesses. So we talk to students about workplaces when they're hiring people. They don't need every single person to have mastered every single skill. They can build teams of people that have different strengths and can fill in other people's weaknesses. So really focusing on those strengths can be motivating, inspiring, can be really helpful instead of what are you not good at? Let's really work hard on that. It's good to build new skills and to get better at things, but focusing on those strengths can really help this career development process and be a positive role model. So when you're thinking about talking about what you do for work and other things, try to think about how you can do that in positive ways. And then last, all of the people who can help students along the way. It's not just schools doing this. It's not just parents and guardians doing this. It can really be a lot of people that we've mentioned several times: family members, neighbors, classroom teachers, school counselors, those work-based learning and flexible pathways coordinators, coaches, mentors, youth group leaders. And there's also government agencies and social service agencies like the Vermont Department of Labor that have staff that can help with this as well. And you may have other resources and ideas too. So thank you for sharing so much in the chat. If anyone has additional questions, you can ask them now. We have a few minutes left, and we're also happy to follow up with you if you would like to do that. We can share more information, but thank you for joining us this morning.
Thank you, Kathi and Lauren, so much. I'm going to pop in some follow-up information while people are maybe thinking about a question, but we really appreciate this session. It was wonderful information. And one of the things I might suggest that I tell parents a lot when I work with them is those jobs in communities where teens work, those supervisors and managers that hire teens are great influencers too. So knowing who the good folks to work for in your community, if you're a teenager, is really helpful. So I'm going to just pop this in the chat, but people can ask questions.
Lauren is going to also share our contact information in the chat, so you can reach out to us directly. We're pretty easy to find online as well. We're right here in Vermont and can help answer any questions you might have. But thanks for being here. It means so much to have so many people showing up today to these events on a Saturday. And I don't know what it's like where you are, but I have blue sky and it's sunny out there. So thanks for spending the morning with us and part of the afternoon.